Carolyn, I am very happy to welcome you to BPW Niagara Falls to be our speaker for this evening. I am thrilled that you will provide us with an oversight on impactful social enterprises and some of the work by construction and solar energy leaders who are implementing the SDGs throughout their daily work. And as well, they are empowering others by the work that they do. And with over 12 years as a registered architect, and you are a volunteer committed to making a difference, you've accumulated a variety of skills and knowledge over 30 years, developing personal and professionally. And this has been reflected in your Myers-Briggs training, which actually I'm quite familiar with. Your skills have included management of a small architectural and building services company to leadership and senior positions in a team environment. Over the last 4.5 years, you have further diversified your career portfolio, gaining extensive experience in remediation work for the Ministry of Education and body corporate projects and full site development of service stations. The floor is yours, Carolyn. Thank you. Carolyn, we cannot hear you. You will have to unmute.
Thank you. Just unmuting. Can you all see my screen? Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you all for inviting me to speak with you today. And I'm hoping you will learn a little bit around the Sustainable Development Goals. And I've put them into a real context around impactful social enterprises and building on the Sustainable Development Goals. So, an overview. Social enterprise, what is it? It's Sustainable Development Goals. The interconnection between SDGs. Are there missing connections between women and social enterprises, next steps, and conclusions? Social enterprise, what is it? So the definition of social enterprises are purpose-driven organisations that trade to deliver social and environmental outcomes, and their purpose is the primary function. An organisation that applies commercial strategies to maximise social impact rather than profits, invest their profits to empower and support local community organisations. Social enterprises look to provide solutions through the operations and giving back to achieve social and environmental outcomes. So social enterprises, there are 4 key principles. 1, it's social environmental purpose. 2, financial self-sustainability and sustainability business model. Limited profit, and 4, participative governance. So you can see here there's a business model spectrum, and what it is around not-for-profit and for-profit. So social enterprises can be aligned across both, work within both spaces. So some examples of, bear with me, social enterprises in different industries. So I've looked at the food industry, clothing, energy, training and employment, recycling and construction. So some context. Magpie Goose. This is an Australian company that was started by 2 women, co-founders Laura Egan and Megan McGowan. And what they found was really important because they wanted to celebrate the Australian art, was they decided to use that in their prints. In 2021, they transitioned this to Aboriginal ownership and leadership, handing over the reins to Brisbane-based creators, curators and entrepreneurs Amanda Heyman Wright and Troy Casey, they're shown above. Is an Aboriginal-owned and led social enterprise that partners with First Nations artists to create powerful statement clothing. Garment offcuts are repurposed into baby rompers by their manufacturing team in Sydney. Oops, just moving something out of my way. Sorry, ladies. And each one of these, I've put a connection to the web link that I've taken this information from. And I've said to Jocelyn, I'll share my PowerPoint presentation. Green Connect, Jobs, People and Planet in Australia. They have 2 parts to their organisation. One's an op shop. They resell donated goods to keep our landfills. The proceeds are invested back in their local communities, and they create jobs for young people and former refugees. The Green Connect Farm is an 11-acre urban farm, and I'm not going to pronounce that because I'll abuse the language, providing sustainable produce while funding sustainable employment. from produce sold, train and employ young people and refugees. Second Harvest, strategic plan and goals for the next 3 years. This is a company of no waste, no hunger, with a mission to grow innovative, efficient food recovery network to fuel people and reduce the environmental impact of avoidable food waste in Canada. So what I've shown is they're increasing their impact, food loss and waste impact on climate change, and on our people and the planet. So what they've achieved was £53 million of food rescued and redistributed, $185 million worth of food rescued and redistributed, and 162 million pounds of green food gases averted by food rescue. Redistributed good surplus in over 900 communities. Oh, you can still only see Magpie? My apologies. Thank you. So this was Green Connect, and it's Illawarra, I think is how I do pronounce it. And so now I'm on Second Harvest. Whoops. Second Harvest, fantastic company in Australia. And sorry, my apologies, Canada. And you can see what they've done on Ontario. Please pronounce it correctly. So what they've done is provided £37.8 million of food, $102 million value of food rescued, and 109 million plus LBS, greenhouse gas averted. So they have supported over 3,000 non-profit organisations and rescued and distributed food to provide an average of 150,000 meals every day. So I'm now showing you a slide of one of the companies, or one of the organisations that have actually benefited from the work that Second Harvest has provided. So the good food impact. Everyone deserves to eat good food. Food insecurity is more about food. Niagara, my apologies, Canada. Oh, the Good Food Impact, previously Good Food Project, started as a research project, which in turn became a community initiative. So the Good Food Kitchen starts in the kitchen, goal to provide nutritious meals for anyone in the community to access. The Good Food Student is food insecurity is about more than food. Their student workshops provide curriculum-based hands-on learning experience in the classroom on the importance of good and the food system. Good Food Community started as a community initiative and continues to be rooted in the community. Work integrated social enterprises, WISE, in Hong Kong. What are the main social and environmental issues in Hong Kong? Here are some relevant examples. Inefficient waste management, poor living conditions for foreign domestic workers and elderly, or youth suffering from a stressful education system. But we met so many inspiring social entrepreneurs who want to make things change. 2 are noted above. Help of Choice improves working conditions for foreign domestic workers, and HKOWRC recycles food waste and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Solar Sisters. A solar sister envisage a bright world powered by women entrepreneurs. Social enterprise operating in Tanzania, Uganda, and Nigeria. The purpose is to eliminate energy poverty through economic empowerment of women. Business training for solar sister entrepreneurs. They can go sell solar lanterns and cooktops as well as be users, and increase empowerment through financial security and respect. The results: improvement in students' education through better lighting, removal of damaging health effects and risk to burns, homes, fires from kerosene lamps, financial benefits to families, increased lighting and ability to charge phones, assist in women business opportunities and growth, and empowerment of women developing new economic and social opportunities. 170% increase in used in lighting after hours, after sunset. So some data, over 8,100 solar sister entrepreneurs have reached 3,516,348 people. Products sold, 732,847. The difference is they're impacting on women's lives. In sub-Saharan Africa, 80% of people cook with harmful, costly fuels. 77% people in rural areas have no access to clean power. So another organisation was acted. Every human being has the right to live in dignity, and the community learning centres play a vital role in providing functional literacy, vocation, and I've just moved my other slide, my apologies. Literacy, vocational skills to skills and work-related skills for marginalised youth and children in the community, particularly those who can't continue to learn in the formal education system. Furthermore, CLCs are a focal place for lifelong learning opportunity for every walk of life. So they look at community ownership, financial stability, income skills, and capacity building training. Niagara Recycling, a pioneer in environmental stewardship and social enterprise. So established in the 1970s, recycling is their key. Niagara Falls, one of the first cities to have residential recycling in 1986. 23 years been a successful public-private partnership. Over $2.5 million contributed to Niagara organisations since 1996, including donate surplus funds to local community organisations that support developmentally challenged children and adults, Niagara Training, and NTEC in Port Robinson, Red Roof Retreat, Pathstone Mental Health, and Momentum Choir. Just to give an understanding, 78,000 tonnes approximately of newspaper, magazines, catalogues, office paper, cardboard, drink box, steel and aluminium cans and foil, gas bottles and jars, plastic bottles, containers, trays and lids, and plastic film are processed annually. Their primary objectives are to provide cost-effective and efficient recycling services to the Niagara region, provide assistance, and I think this is really important, to non-profit agencies that are involved in providing or facilitating opportunities and support for developmentally challenged adults living in the Niagara region. Personally, I know what that's like when I've worked with special needs education schools. I've designed them. And noted, employs 4 full-time staff and operates a part-time employment training program in partnership with NTEC for up to 3 part-time developmentally challenged adults. What I did like, accepts polystyrene, black plastic, like your flower pots and take-out food trays, glass processing system results making their own Niagara Eco Glass for resale. Fantastic reuse. So, waste management in Auckland. In New Zealand, be the leader in materials and energy recovery, powering the circular economy and the journey to a carbon positive future for Aotearoa, New Zealand. I've just about left you behind on a screen. Right. So, what Waste Management New Zealand do? They are one of the biggest companies. They've built a huge plant in Auckland, which is totally sustainable. Any energy that from the waste that they burn off actually helps power the building, helps power their electrical trucks that actually go and pick up the waste. The landfill that they've been working on has actually captured over 90% of the gas produced and converted it to electricity to feed back into the national grid. So all of those are quite successful outcomes. Their environment, so each thing that was really important, they looked at the SDGs and how they valued those within the business. So they looked at our environment, our communities, our customers, our people, our business. So the important thing for them was our business contribute to New Zealand's circular economy, manage climate change risk, and minimise our own waste. So they even look at how they're operating, and they actually have certificates to see how they're achieving zero carbon. They are really important on improving stakeholder understanding around waste management, hosted ministers and the Green Building Council, improve community understanding of waste issues. For example, sponsored some of the Auckland events and education programs, expand engagement with communities, using volunteering to increase their contribution. I think they could do a little bit more in this space after seeing what Niagara does. So now we're talking about some construction companies. Home. It's their mission to ensure that every family in New Zealand and throughout the world has access to safe, warm and affordable housing. Home was established in 2012, I think basically after the earthquakes. It's a New Zealand-wide construction company, and they're also a WEP signatory, I would add, and one engaged to deliver New Zealand's largest social housing development program. Israel Cooper is the managing director. He's here in the middle photo, and his business partner and wife, Jessica Cooper, people left. Their partnerships exist so for them, their partnerships are Home Foundation, exist to enable a world where everyone has a home to end homelessness. Habitat for Humanity, to give those a hand up, projects in New Zealand, Nepal and Fiji. And then in 2022, teams went to help rebuild businesses in Tonga because of the tsunamis and the damage that was there. Whole businesses were gone. Parenting Place, where every whānau thrives and every child feels deeply loved. Canterbury Regional Basketball Foundation, growing basketball and community development scholarship opportunities with the Rams. I've gone to a few shows. Project Esther, working with women and their families with specific focus for those at risk. 24/7 youth work, believing young people want to see them enjoy their school years and build upon foundation into adult life. And then finally, Preemptive Love Coalition stretches across Iraq, Syria, the United States and beyond, working together to unmake violence and create the more beautiful world our house knows possible. Amazing company. Now back to Canada. Construct, to offer quality labour services by empowering those facing barriers to transition to autonomous and full-time employment in the trades, helping to change the lives of marginalised individuals who face barriers to employment. So just to look at their statistics, they've noted that it costs $24 approximate hourly rate needed to rent a one-bedroom apartment in York Region. There's 62% of contractors in Ontario, experienced in shortage of skilled workers in the last year, and 5.4% rate of unemployment in York Region. So that's quite significant. So they look at how they can get young people to get back on their feet through stable, well-paying careers, stay housed and continue developing their career, ultimately thriving professionally and personally, and ensure graduates are successful. Construct actively works with community stakeholders to determine the best supports and resources to provide for each trainee. And they applies a process to include integrity, innovation and sustainability within a framework of inclusivity, diversity and opportunity. So now the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. So a little bit of background. They were established and agreed with the resolution AR, computers closed. There we are. Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The agenda is a plan of action for people, planet and prosperity. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace and larger freedom. We recognise that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. So I'm sure you know that it's 169 targets, 231 indicators with 247 in total, 12 repeat under 2 or 3, and SDGs and their respective targets and indicators are interconnected across multiple goals, providing stronger integration across the SDGs. So a little bit of background for Asia Pacific region. Are we on target to achieve the 2030 agenda? Asia Development Bank report in 2013, pre-COVID, approximately women represented 10% or less in senior management roles and 5% of chief executive roles. Women often have low and middle management posts, an example of vertical occupational segregation by sex. Review March 2022. Women make up half the workforce in agriculture, forestry and fishing. So I've put some statistics for you. Nepal, 64%, Papua New Guinea, 53%, Cambodia, 52%. And then occupation segregation across the sector is widespread. Women underrepresented in land and biodiversity. Samoa, 7%, Maldives, 5%, and Tonga, 3%. And the energy sector, women only hold 24% of all managerial roles and only 5% of all technical positions. Renewable energy sector, women's participation only between 32 to 35% of the workforce, with higher representation in administrative roles than managerial roles. Next slide. Oops, it's just, don't know what it's doing there. Excuse me for a moment. It's opening another PowerPoint. Right. So Asia and the Pacific SDG Progress Report 2022 disparities. COVID-19 pandemic and climate change has impacted on the Asia Pacific region, where it achieved none of the 17 SDGs. Urgent need for regional collaboration and partnership. Gender equality is slow, with some improvements reported, with women representation both in national parliaments, 10% in 9 of 14 countries, and I know New Zealand's doing well, but not the rest of the region, and managerial positions of 25 to 45%. So, Asia Pacific, snapshot of the SDG progress. Little or no progress on SDG 4, quality education, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 6, water and sanitation, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 14, life below water. Go figure. So, gender equality. Goal 5, poor reporting on gender equality, insufficient proxy indicators to fill in data gaps, some progress in proportional representation, leadership and decision-making roles, wider gender gap in access to employment and education. It's been slow progress in major areas, with regression occurring against 2050 baseline for decent work and economic growth. Economic growth has been maintained across the region, while the gross domestic product growth rate has reduced in the least developed countries, and requirements are needed for increased compliance with labour rights, provide decent employment opportunities, especially for youth, reduce its material footprint and consumption to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. I should read that. So the Pacific 2021 SDG, the Pacific has gone backwards in achieving SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, SDG 10, reduced inequalities, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, and SDG 13, climate action. So again, just a snapshot to show you where the current progress, what's on target and what's slipping. So the green is what's been achieved, and across all others, orange, or in some cases, red or grey. So now I'm coming to a comparison of the SDGs between Finland, who are ranked first. So that's 1 out of 163 countries that have reported, with overall index score of 86.51%, and New Zealand is 26, and Canada is 29th. So looking at some of the core things, the SDG strategy and SDGs intersectional actional plans, sectorial actional plans, both Canada and Finland have them. New Zealand doesn't. SDGs and national budget. Finland has an SDGs and overarching narrative. Neither Canada or Australia have anything in their budgets. Designated lead unit, both Finland and Canada do, New Zealand does not. So the government commitments and efforts for the SDGs, there's a score in the pilot version. So high SDG commitment, and they've been rated between 65 to 80, Finland. Moderate SDG commitment, 50 to 65, Canada. And low SDG commitment, 40 to 50, New Zealand. So I'm just showing you what they actually look like. So the green dot says it's SDG achieved, and the arrow, the work's on track or maintaining, and moderately improving or stagnating or decreasing. The red is definitely the decrease. So performance by SDG, as you can see, there's a number of yellows, so we're not quite there, or we're doing some work. The orange definitely needs more work, and anything with red we are going backwards. And one of the things that you'll note, look at SDG 12, responsible consumption and production and climate action. Canada is making some changes and improvements, but they're still going backwards. Climate action, definitely performance-wise, it's behind, but there is some work being made. So there's major challenges, but there's some moderate improvement. So you'll see the index score for Canada was 77.73% and New Zealand was 78.3% for the index score. So now interconnections, and I did it again, my biggest apology to you both, to you all. So this is the data that I've shown you for New Zealand and Canada. So New Zealand, you'll see that both the responsible and consumption, SDG 12 and SDG 13 are red. We're actually going backwards. And with Canada, climate action is red, but there is some action happening around climate action, and responsible consumption is also going down. So interconnections work between social enterprises and the SDGs. So now you've got to understand there's social enterprises and how the SDGs work and how do these come together. So business and management principles to solve social problems, look to the development of efficient, affordable and cost-effective solutions, understanding working within severe resource constraints, innovative and develop ways within restrictive financial returns, provide interdisciplinary approaches that intersector collaboration, and social entrepreneurs collaborate and draw on ideas from multiple areas, not constrained by traditional frameworks. So, social enterprises and the SDGs, importance of stakeholder participation in social enterprise governance with collaborative engagement and outcomes. Social enterprises are considered hybrid organizations and not aligned exclusively with idealized functions of private, public, or non-profit organizations. The goal for social, environmental, and financial objectives to achieve their mission, why they exist, and to achieve their goals gives them primary function over profit making. The criticism of the SDGs, failure to recognize the importance businesses will have to contribute to ensure the SDGs are achieved through responsible trading, value supply chains, social entrepreneurship, and social enterprises. So how social enterprises are having an impact on SDGs. So I thought represented earlier in the PowerPoint shows some of how they contribute to one or more of the SDGs. And that's through their external social environmental commitments, though none have reported their links with the SDGs. This is an opportunity for them to do so. So I'm showing you what they could cover. Green Connect, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and life on land, SDG 15. Second Harvest, SDG 0, hunger, and SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. Magpie Goose, SDG 1, no poverty, and SDG 8, D8, decent work and economic growth. Wise, SDG 4, quality education, and SDG 8, decent work. If you've got decent work and you've got economic growth, then everyone can get homes. There's no poverty. And Solar Sister, SDG, gender equality, and SDG, affordable and clean energy. So, social SDGs, social enterprises, and the construction and waste sector. What relevance SDGs have an influence on the construction sector? In principle, the general practice items include human sustainability, education, economic growth, social equity, climate awareness, responsible construction methods, waste management, and community engagement. In respect to the SDGs and sustainability, for it to be effectively implemented and achieve far-reaching outcomes, it requires leadership and implementation into the daily activities and performance with measurable outcomes. The SDGs can provide comprehensive reporting for the International Organization for Standardization, ISO audit assessments. So looking back, Niagara recycling. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. Waste management New Zealand. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. SDG 13, climate action. Home. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. And SDG, sustainable cities and communities. And construct. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. And SDG 10, reduce inequalities. So there are the SDGs, the targets and indicators that can be implemented effectively across the construction and waste management sectors. And behind this screen, this image, that is actually a dashboard that I designed for a construction company. So social enterprises, I'm getting close to finishing. Social enterprises, how they contribute. Ethical sourcing or supply of products in circular economy, business operations through employment of staff, youth, refugees, migrants, achieving diversity across all areas and ages, the products and services they offer, e.g. solar lights, work environments and development, use of their profits or surplus through other projects, e.g. Habitat for Humanity, community awareness programs, direct programs and interventions, example, construct education programs, scholarships or capacity building, value chain operations, e.g. wise focus on work integration for marginalised people. Are there missing connections between women and social enterprises? Social enterprises break down traditional barriers in line with multiple SDGs and targets. Social enterprises break with traditional business methods. It is their mission statements, their social environmental framework that creates diversity and interlinks to various SDGs. SDG 4, quality education. SDG 5, gender equality. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. SDG 10, reduce inequalities. SDG 16, peace, justice and strong institutions. And SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. So social enterprises come in different forms. Enact is an international non-profit organisation with a mission to inspire students to improve the world through entrepreneurial action. So one is called Red Light Project UK, Solar Light Entrepreneur Support in Kenya, Uganda and Madagascar. And they have SDG 7 plus the SDGs 1, 3 and 8. Tenaga National University, Malaysia, established a social enterprise beekeeping business impacted on SDGs 1, 2, 8 and 7. BRAC, 16 social enterprises, addresses community needs whilst increasing self-sufficiency. Arong created in 1978 to establish livelihoods for women in the craft sector to protect and promote traditional artisanal crafts impacts on SDGs 1, 2, 5 and 8. And Barak Dairy, efficiency in the dairy supply chain, increasing market stability and ensuring fair pay, impacting on SDGs 1, 2, 4, 8, 9 and 15. So next steps. Can women influence social enterprise building on the SDGs? Yes. How to influence impactful social enterprises to build on the SDGs through SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. Collaboration and engagement to raise awareness, networks, business partnerships, seminars, sustainable development goals, introductions. I've been surprised at the number of people who don't understand what SDGs are. Looking at abilities for companies to report against existing indicators and company-specific indicators. Strengthen connections with women affiliations. Creating connections for social enterprise. Incorporating SDGs into social enterprises requires engagement with all stakeholders. Developing company-specific dashboards. Implementing current SDG targets, indicators, interlinking, and creating new specific indicators. Provide mechanisms for measurable outcomes. Ensure they report on the links for specific SDGs which align with their social, environmental, and financial reporting, therefore providing legitimacy to their reporting. Cultural and ethnic diversity. Engagement with all stakeholders will be important for successful outcomes. Understand the cultural and ethnic diversity of the existing community. and the need to work closely with public and private sectors to engage with the diversity of stakeholders and any specific needs. So conclusions. Social enterprises, through their missions, their actions, and the way they operate, already illustrate that they meet one or more SDGs. Providing that engagement to show how the SDGs can be added to the sustainable framework adds to the work they are doing. Social enterprises and the SDGs. Social enterprises, through their core values, their mission statements, identify their social and or environmental commitments. The work being undertaken by social enterprises provides opportunities to not work within traditional business models to meet their social goals. Partnerships, using the skills and business experience with the knowledge of the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals, will develop the interconnections across the various social enterprises and the work they do. Having companies incorporate the SDGs will add more quantifiable and quantitative reporting that can be submitted through to the UN and Australia, for example, the Pacific region and Canada are working towards 2030 agenda. To date, there are gaps in reporting and no framework to bridge the space where businesses, social enterprises, and entrepreneurs are making a difference and are addressing the SDGs. Building on the Sustainable Development Goals is a requirement now to meet the 2030 agenda deadlines. Only 7 years to go to achieve them. Are you part of the journey? Thank you.
My goodness, Carolyn, you have opened our eyes more than we ever expected.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Absolutely fascinating. I am so glad you will be sharing these presentations with us, and I'll be able to email them to our attendees as well as the people who couldn't attend tonight. So thank you. At this point, you can take questions from the people attending.
I have a question. Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes, your background is actually not showing very well. It's like a strobe. It might be good if you were to stop that background. That would really help.
I can't do it. As long as you can hear me okay. It was funny because I got interrupted due to that like update.
Oh, okay.
But I think it's amazing that we're I was thinking about that purpose. Like I was in manufacturing, right? Everything's data driven and results, right? So when I kind of started looking out into the world, it's all this purpose driven, and we're like, so these a lot of grant dollars and attention by organizations like corporations on sustainable or nonprofits or these kinds of organizations that are attached to SDGs. So I think it's and you did a fantastic job with the presentation showing those metrics. Like this is how we impacted the GHG of this community, right? There's really like if we're going to do something, did it do something, right? So really showing that, and I think as business owners or entrepreneurs, attaching the human data, like I might have educated people, but how was that education implemented? And kind of looking at how we show what we do in a way that's relatable to these organizations today, like using these metrics, right? And the other thing was really scary, this NEAT number. Do you know anything about this NEAT number, Carolyn?
I haven't heard it.
So it's on the SDG, it's in red. It's no employment, education, or training. So in London, Ontario, 15% of kids aged 18 to 29, 15% are not in employment, education, or training. So we're like, like what are they gonna do? Like my formative years were my 20s. Like I learned so much because people have a more open heart to learning and capacity growing. But yeah, those kinds of things are scary, but it's definitely, I'm looking at political platforms and using these metrics, right? And saying, these are the results driven and why, right? But so
absolutely.
Really, I mean, I could talk all day about this. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh wait, there was in New Zealand there's a great shoe factory that uses plastics, I think, recycled plastics to make shoes. It's a really amazing product.
I'll have to go and have a look at that one. I know there's some amazing companies that are doing some really great work, and to me that's been the real shift. And because of the size in New Zealand, there's some of that creativity is actually being brought about because of COVID and our isolation. And even materials, people are looking at, oh, what are we going to do about materials? So they're having to start to think outside the box.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you. Norma?
Actually, joining what Charlotte said, Carolyn, a lot of these social enterprises, do they advertise or do they market that they're following the SDGs?
No, and that's one of the big problems. So I'm going to meet one of the contractors hopefully in the next week or two, because they should be. And some of the bigger companies are now doing it, like Fletcher's Construction actually identify which SDGs they are meeting in the community. So I could have shown them, but I wanted to show someone that was smaller and doing something that's really, I feel like they're really making a difference in our communities, but worldwide. They've got a bigger vision. And there's another construction company that is saying, oh, we're aligning with the SDGs. But every one of those other companies or organizations that I showed you, not one of them, except for Construct, who have said these are their sustainable principles or waste management, actually show what those SDGs are aligning with. So it was quite interesting when this is a marketing thing, but also if you're going to do it, it can't be a tick box exercise. You actually have to show the value.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, too, when you were talking, I was thinking about, we always expect the government to be the one that drives everything. And SDGs have come, 2015, and in BPW London, we've been talking about them more when they first came out. It's almost like they're old hat now, so we don't think about them except, to say, oh yeah, we're covering them all just by the work we do. And then when you said the Canada is doing all these good things, and I thought we're almost doing it almost by accident, because when I looked up the mandate letter for the infrastructure, the minister who's in charge of Canada infrastructure, and nowhere in the mandate does it talk about the SDGs, but everything lined out what he has to do is about making strong communities, making the connections with the businesses, making sure the Indigenous communities are being looked into. Like it's like a catch-all basin for all of them. And my question was going to be, we all admire your prime minister.
Oh, we love her.
We love her. And does she ever talk about them? Does the New Zealand government ever talk about them?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we had an SDGs summit at the end of, was it last year? The year before. I'm right in the middle of my master's, actually. And one of the things, the Auditor General actually did a review and said, we are way behind. Our government is not doing X, Y, and Z. And they're not. And to me, I believe if we've got all these companies that are doing exactly what you're saying, then they are actually applying the principles, but they haven't actually advertised or reported on it. To me, if they were, it would shift the bar. It would change those graphs from going backwards to actually showing it's going forwards. And there's actually some significant work. Like, for example, Home, they're a WEP signatory, and they actually took out 2 awards last year. They are a construction company I used to work with. I was their client, and I actually got them to become a signatory. And to me, their work is amazing, what they're doing around those educational programs for women. They don't have a them and us in their business. And so they were asked a question in the survey, and they went, well, it's not relevant to us. We don't even work like that. But it was interesting, just the mindset. So I believe it's really important that businesses and the construction centre, even the architectural industry itself, profession, is now looking at the SDGs. But we've only got 7 years. It's like why weren't we doing this back in 2015 when it was said this was coming into place? You can't go 2015, 2023, and it's just, oh, yeah, we'll get there. And then suddenly, oh my gosh, it's like the end of the line. It's like when you're driving a car and thinking, am I going to actually get to the next fuel site, petrol station? I've left it a bit late to fill up my car. So it's that sort of a... Sorry?
Oh, I was going to say, the conversation's been going on a long time. The UN's so far away from the action. In Canada's Ministry of Environment, we published biodiversity in the 70s. We have best practices for agriculture. So research, I mean, when the United Nations says, okay, we talked to everybody, we pulled all the research on the globe, and yeah, climate change is real. That conversation's been going on for a long time. And the reason you're seeing, hey, maybe it kind of feels holistic change, it's stay in business. So I know we're traveling to different countries and living in other countries, but the truth of the matter is the people who are in the 50% poverty line, their lives are very delicate on a day-to-day basis. So they're ready for change. I think the leadership isn't, because they're not feeling like privilege isn't feeling scarcity. So, this conversation is a long time coming. The businesses that you mentioned are capturing circular economy, right? So yes. That statistically, I think Norway has 30% circular economy. And as someone from the mining and pulp and paper business, it's a lot of energy and to make a tin can. And so the value in that tin can is enormous to reuse it, right? So I kind of say our next business is mining our garbage, because what we thought
I think that's one of the things I liked about the Niagara recycling, because of the fact not only are they recycling, but they've actually made a byproduct. They've made the glass, and they call it eco glass. So that to me is a really good way of moving forward. And you're right, this has been out there in discussion for years. I mean, we've had the Paris Agreement, we've had COP 21, 22, 23. We've but and back in the 70s. But when you think about, when you look what it was like back then too, it was all considered that you must grow long wavy hair and colourful bands and smoke something funny, because it wasn't considered green, and ecological was not considered serious. There wasn't a monetary value to be had out of it. And that's like, I was part of and I was the environmental chair for nearly 10 years with the Institute of Architects. And one of the things was we had a charter on what should be sustainable environmental architecture. But even today, if you look at architectural awards, how many look at green building or green? I mean, there's a green star now, you get a certification, but actually green building, the grassroots stuff, it has not been still at that top priority. It's now important because governments are leading it and say any building over this value has to be a green star building. Any building over this value, any homes that they're building are all home star 7. So, or home, I think they've gone up to home star 5, 6, 7, but one of them. So there is a shift, but Europe has always been the leaders in this space, in their construction and their methodology, the way they heat, the way they reuse energy. But a lot of other places don't even have that resource to draw on. So, but I think
from the engineering standpoint, I was like, oh, this has been benchmarked in Europe, right? But no, I have a really good friend from Christchurch who I met a few years ago, and really shocked and surprised. Like, I can't remember how, I was probably a young girl, when the CFC and the ozone layer came about, and super proud that, as a child, seeing leadership make changes. But I had no concept, and I call this like closing the gap, that New Zealand, it's bylaw, you have to wear hats going to school. She said it was nice, our sun is gentle, but it's still impacted by that environmental aspect. And I'm dealing with PFAS. and like leadership.
All right.
PFAS is,
Yep.
oh my gosh, terrible stuff. But like, how are these things coming to market, right? So getting things at the front end of things too.
Yep. No, and the sunlight in New Zealand, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
We can get burnt in a very short period of time.
She's like, oh, we have a gentle sun.
I think I'm going to have to be careful how I phrase this because I'm not even sure what I'm talking about at times. But I think we need to bottom line some of this stuff. And I think some of it is far too government oriented, which I don't know how the rest of you feel, but we need our government. I'm not suggesting we don't need them because we do, but they've got so many things they have to look at. And I wonder if we don't need to start moving from the bottom up instead of the top down, because I think if sometimes good things come about because they're educated when they're 6 years old about it, rather than when they're 16 or 25, because by that time they got other things to worry about. I just see this as so important. And I mean, you look around today at like the climate change. My goodness, the climate, if that doesn't scare the heck out of you, it ought to, because places that have never ever had horrible like look at California as an example. The whole state's underwater.
Yes, they don't have infrastructure for storms.
They don't have anything because they never expected to have it. Nobody ever said, oh my goodness, just maybe we should have paid attention 20 years ago when such and such happened. But if we aren't educating our children, and it's our children who nag. I can recall when smoking was a big problem. And I remember I wasn't supposed to be doing this, but I got roped into teaching health class once. And it was about smoking. And I don't smoke and I don't like it. And I told those kids, I said, if you ever smoke, you can count on it. I'm going to be sitting on your shoulder watching you for the rest of your life. And you know what? It worked.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't proper and all that, but that doesn't matter. I didn't think of that till after. But maybe we have to go at the kids and get them more educated and more aware, because that's where change seems to come from.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does come from that. I'm looking at some of the companies that you talked about, Carolyn, here in Niagara, and I'm thinking about some of the other ones and about garbage. I worked in the garbage industry back in 1985, and I was in St. Catharines, and it was municipal garbage for 4 municipalities, but not Niagara Falls, where I lived. And I was there when Niagara Falls started the blue bins. And I talked to my boss, why are we not suggesting that here in St. Catharines? She says, it's never going to work. I said, you know what? They just started it in Niagara Falls. I swear 75% of the people on my street had blue boxes out that day.
Yeah.
For the very first time, right?
And St. Catharines, in spite of what she said, we're fanatic about recycling and things like that.
Well, now, Anne, but not back in the 80s. Like,
well,
but St. Catharines landfill at the time,
yeah,
I worked for, that was the same company. They were sorting at source.
Yeah, okay.
In the landfill, taking the cardboard and selling it, taking the tin cans and the glass, and they had a market for it, right? And they were getting rid of the other stuff by burning, which was not as environmentally friendly, but they got, the landfill started to fill up, and they said, no, this is not going to work. But I'll tell you, the landfill that took over after, it's almost full now. You have to do that, yeah. even with the sorting, but still there's many people who don't do the sorting. And of course, because it was in garbage. Because
in our building, you should see the we've got a half of our parking area downstairs is strictly sorting. Oh,
That's
everything.
awesome, Anne.
It's really awesome.
It is, but back in the 80s, when I lived in St. Catharines in an apartment building, we had to find a place to take our recycling to.
Yes, I agree.
Because we've been doing it since I started working in garbage, because there's just no place for it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about how we go to the different companies. I think about the one recycling company here, not Niagara Recycling, but here in Port Colborne, there's a place, I think they said they were the first ones to be recycling batteries and in an environmentally friendly way. And it's here in Port Colborne. I was there with the chamber meeting, and it's, how do we find out about these people so that that needs to be advertised more and more and more?
Yeah, I agree.
The social benefits.
I have an acquaintance, not a friend, like an acquaintance that came here to our building to talk to us a few times. Her name's Emily, and she works for the region. And that's the kind of thing she does. Now, she's the kind of person probably you could talk to and say, hey, isn't it about time you looked at the SDGs and advertised what you're doing and how it's working and what's the point? Maybe that's where we have to go. I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Somebody else should talk.
Yeah, Nancy, you have to unmute.
Unmute.
Okay. I was going to say, my husband comes from Amsterdam, Holland, and I find that Europe is a lot more progressive than Canada and the States. And when we bought this property in 1971, he had some big barrels and he filled them with our glass jars in one and metal cans in the other. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm recycling, because in Holland, they had a man that would come around and everybody would save their bones from their meat. And he would get that, and he would, that would go into compost. Another man would come around and they'd collect old clothing, sheets, towels, old things that you worn out no matter what condition they were. And that would be recycled. The glass jars would be washed, purified, and reused. The metal cans, I'm not sure what they did with the metal cans, but I guess they melted them down and made them into new cans. So he was starting it here where they had never heard of recycling here. And so my kids grew up with it. And when Derek, my younger son, was 7 years old, he went to the principal and he says, why are we throwing all these juice boxes and pop bottles and stuff in the garbage? We're supposed to be recycling them. So he got the school in St. David's to start recycling, which meant another school in Queenston, another one in Virgil. They all started recycling because my son, who was educated by us, saying this is why we're doing it, you know, he used to go around and gather up the bags of leaves that people would rake off their lawns, and they would go in the garbage. Well, Derek would go around and grab them, put them in his big dump truck, and hike them down to our back garden and dump them and compost them into the soil. He recycles everything. You know, he would. I'm telling you, it was getting pretty bad when he was a kid. We'd be driving down a road. He says, "Someone's dumped a beer case." And so we'd have to back up and stop while he jumped out and rescued the case of beer bottles out of the ditch, put them in the trunk, and then he would take them in to be recycled and reused, and he would get some money on top of that. So we do it kind of to an extreme, I realize that, but we separate everything. And today was recycle day, and we separate everything, and we have a bag with just the plastics, and we have a bag for the soft plastics, and we have a thing for cardboard, and it's all site. Now my son's landlords, when they come to visit, they dump everything in one garbage can, which really makes him mad, but he will resort their darn garbage and put it all proper. They will not. They're from Toronto. They do not believe, I guess, in recycling. They waste a lot of food, and even half bottles of wine and stuff, and that kind of thing. But but it's all, yes, I agree. It's all about educating our kids. And because of my husband's history, living to 13 in Holland and seeing how they grew up, that brought a lot of awareness to our family.
Yeah, my grandfather.
In turn, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is in turn influenced other people. So, if more and more people did it and talk to their friends about why they're doing it, I think that's very.
Well, I'll tell you this: that we should get this Emily gal to come and talk to us, because she could. It's more what Carolyn's done here is opened our eyes to the overall picture, which just blows me away. But we could get somebody like Emily, if she came, she could say, okay, here's a small few things you can do that are start you in the right direction. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, every year I ask that we as members create a report and send it to us with the BPW Niagara Falls email, so that at the end of April, I put this together in the president's report, and that goes to the upper levels. And I actually was so impressed with what was done with this. I'm really looking forward to reading the new ones that'll come out to me and at the end of April. I created a page on our website that contains all of those reports that were sent to me, the SDG page. And it shows at a personal level what can be done. And the thing is, it has to start somewhere, and it has to start in our families with ourselves.
Exactly.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, my son, because he's a tow truck driver for CAA, he gets a lot of people who say, I'm tired of this car, it's always breaking down, take it to the dump. And Derek will pay them what they would get at the scrap dealer, and then he'll tow it home. And then he takes out and he'll sell windows, dashboards, electronic things, speedometers, batteries. He'll take the old gas out of the car and recycle that. And he parts out everything until he can't get rid of anything else. And then he takes the what's left, the carcass, off to the scrapyard and get money for that. And that metal is redone to make new cars. And that's what he does. In fact, he collects batteries as well. And every year he makes one trip to somewhere in Hamilton, and he'll take about 100 or so batteries and catalytic converters, because catalytic converters, one off each car, have precious metals in them. So he recycles as much as you can possibly recycle. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it's okay, he's got the right idea.
I wonder where he got that.
I don't know.
Anyone has any more questions for Carolyn before we stop the recording?
I'm like, oh yeah, what was that question? Carolyn, first, I really appreciated your emphasis on networking and collaborating with like-minded organizations. That's super important. And Nancy just hit on what I was going to talk about, was this in engineering. Like, I actually have friends who, there's the business of planned redundancy. So a failure of a part of a blender, and so the cost of replacing the whole blender is cheaper or less energy than replacing the part. And what would be your like from a platform perspective? How would it be a leadership thing that's saying you're either responsible for that product that your company's putting out, thereby making it redundant to have things fail, right? Or like how would we address that change specifically?
Okay, no loaded question, was it? One, I would suggest you look at a program, a YouTube thing called Stuff. And it was something my professor got us to have a look at when we were doing our masters. And it's really, really good. It's called Stuff. And it's basically, why do we have stuff? And what happened after the Second World War, you'll know that products started to lose the ability for life. So I must admit, I'm a real big fan of the Repair Shop, the British show. I love that program.
Yeah, it's really fun.
If I could do that, that would be my ideal.
You should come over for my reno.
I just love it. And so when, for example, we're doing alterations to our home, we reuse part of the nice timber backing that was part of our kitchen, and we've cut it down for the new bench top. We've painted it so, and anything that we can use, we'll reuse. So that's what we do personally. But the thing is, around that, it comes back to the companies themselves. So there's a thing called cradle to grave around in the construction industry. So it looks, section A, part of A is around where a material starts from, where the product is actually sourced from the ground or from a tree, and what happens when it's being produced, what happens to it when it comes to in the design, how it's been used, through to delivery at the construction site. So that's A1 to A5 or 6. Don't quote me on that because I haven't got it in front of me. But the important thing was understanding that where, for example, you're cutting down trees, what are you doing to the local environment? What are you doing to the local economy? What are you doing to the people that live there?
So
what is the impact?
If we should show the value stream mapping, like that process to the consumer, that consumer would be more like
aware.
Have a formative decision, let's say.
Yes. And thank you for the link. I've had a look at your website as well. So it is important. So if you said, for example, there's an amazing woman, Carol Hanlon, and she does the business incubator. She's part of BPW in Australia. And she talks, like now, I would be really, really super cautious on buying a t-shirt or where the t-shirt came from, because how much water is used to produce one t-shirt. So I've totally changed my thinking of that. We're doing my master's, and our professors and the different people we had speak to us have made me really look at what some of the things I do. I might not be able to condition someone else, but if I make a small step to make a change, then that's my part. Yeah. And when it comes to design, and as I said, I could have shown you a PowerPoint presentation on architecture, but when it comes to design, I look at the environment, I look at the site, I look at how I can design a home so that, or the building, so that the client has the least amount of cost for long-term operation, because people are power poor as well. So it's that part of it, and that's one of the ones I did for the international conference on residential energy and environmental buildings, to look at what would happen to a building. So to me, it's always about site. It's about the locations chosen by the client. So it's how you position a building to get the best out of that, so they get the benefits. So low cost in operating, and that's how my design philosophy has always been. And I can have clients validate that the houses have been designed exactly the way they were meant to be.
Excellent. Excellent.
So when I come back, though, Anne made a comment as well earlier, when it comes to educating or to go out, why not? Why doesn't BPW either hold a couple of seminars or a couple of workshops and start getting some of these companies to come on board? Happy to be a speaker if you wanted. But what you could do is go, this is an awareness on SDG and how it's actually your business is doing it. We want to move, for example, you want to move Canada forward to shift the bars from being in a negative into a positive. And by doing that, you need to show that there are companies out there already implementing the SDGs. They've just never thought to report on it. They never saw the importance of it. And I could design for these companies the dashboards. And those dashboards, I showed you a quick glimpse. In the dashboard, it looks at what are the key SDGs that are relevant for their business, what are the targets that they could apply for. So there could be, say, 3 targets under any SDG. So one is around quality education or health and well-being. So in the construction industry, it's really important. Health and safety, drugs and alcohol, and mental health now. So that is an SD. So under the SDG, those are 3 targets. And then there's indicators. So what are they doing that could actually align with what they've been putting in place? Then they can report on it it could go into a national report and say, well, actually, Canada's been doing a huge amount of work. We've had businesses doing this work, applying these SDGs in the way they operate. Now we need to celebrate it. So at the moment, when you look at some of those statistics, and if I went back and showed you that screen from where Canada's sitting, it's looking quite poor. But when I looked and started to do some research on some of the companies, there's actually some really good stuff happening. And this is where having the knowledge and experience, you can have those conversations. And that's what's really important.
Yes. Yeah, we could even get your local MPs and MPPs and whatnot involved, because that would be really good advertising for them. As you're saying, there are things happening that we don't know about.
Absolutely.
And that could be really like our government could use all the help it can get right now, because it's got some very interesting opposition coming along, and they don't want to do anything.
I think it's a good idea to put that on a projects list.
Yeah.
And actually start actively looking at.
Yeah, I think we could do something like this.
Yeah. It
like my daughter works for Walker Industries, and I know they do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'd like more.
Walker's is great. And there was like one fun project I looked. So I'm from mining, so being in southwestern Ontario, I'm like agriculture, but there's this by regulation by the government, if a dairy farmer overproduces milk, or if there's a supply chain issue, they have to dump that milk to the ground. Yeah. And from a grassroots point, like I looked through regulations, I talked to quotas, you could actually, call up a pasteurizer. Like these are 1930s regulations.
I know, they're stupid.
And yep, so and send, hey, here's a grassroots pasteurizer on a truck, literally. And I could do like HACCP, like the food safety aspects, like tip top easy. At a grassroots level, there's legal freedoms. And as soon as you get in politicians or municipal, you get into the regular illegals. But if you did it grassroots, you can do it.
And now awesome. I've got another challenge for you. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Charmaine. But one of the other things, do you think about some of the food companies that sell takeaways? One of the pet hates I have is if I see McDonald's or KFC thrown on the roadside. Yeah. And you see Coke cans, or when I was a kid. Cups. Yeah. Well, I've got my recyclable cups. My husband curses because I seem to always buy another one just to
I know, I'm bad myself.
And but one of the things, when I was a kid, we used to do a drive at the school for raising money. So all the cans were collected. Yeah. And then the school would those cans would go back to the manufacturers and they'd pay for it. But that money went into the school. None of that seems to happen now. Like you could, if you had a can or a bottle, you could take it back to local dairy or whatever, and you'd get money back. But they're not, as soon as it's out the door, no one's interested what happens to it. And I took a photo. We went along the coast for over the holidays, and amazing scenery. And I think it was Purvis Beach, Purvis Beach, I think it was. But there's a photo because the banks are all collapsing, but there's all these Coke cans, and it just made me so angry. And then we further up the coast when we left, there's all these tires that have been thrown. Now there's I don't know if you've seen the video, but there's an amazing young woman in Africa who's making lampshades and coffee tables out of tires. And they've even made a powered table where you could plug in your jug and charge your phone up and stuff. And to me, that's amazing. There's innovation that people are thinking of how to use products.
Well, here's a simple thing that we can't recycle. You know, the plastic bags we use, the ones that you can close.
Yeah, with the Ziploc.
Yep.
Yeah,
Ziploc job. They can't be recycled, and you know why?
Why?
Because the Ziploc catches as it's going through the
Okay.
Whatever you call that thing they got.
But when the last flyer came out about recycling, I read every word. And yes, it is a brand new thing now. We are allowed to recycle those Ziplocs.
Oh.
It's a brand new thing. It just came out with the very latest one.
Well, I'll have to notice that then, because my understanding, what we were told when we had these little talks coming in here, was in order to recycle those Ziploc bags, we had to cut the Ziploc part off. Well, now I do it once in a while, but I'm sorry, I don't take time with that.
I don't find it difficult to do that. So I don't find it difficult to cut that off.
It's not difficult. It's just another thing to do.
It's just another thing. Yeah, I know.
And that sometimes in my life is one more thing I need.
Well, there's so much that we can do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like composting.
Anyway, thanks. We have
to compost more. I have my clothesline. I didn't use it enough this past summer.
I will never use the clothesline.
I love using my clothesline. I love being in nature and using my clothesline.
I don't have one anymore.
You know, and then at the networking group that I run, the one person there, she's in nature and native and all this stuff. There's so much we can do that we just need to be informed, like Carolyn did tonight. Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was really, really good. And then we have to take our own next step in what can we do. So the question has been asked, and that's going to have to come up at our next BPW meeting.
I'm willing to cut off the Ziplocs, but I am not willing.
The Ziplocs is on the, I just put the list in the chat, and that's the newest list. And yes, Ziplocs are included now.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear that, because I'm gonna have to unpack a whole bag I've got for going for garbage. We have sections for garbage only. We have sections for plastic only. We have sections for, well, you name it. We got.
Did you ever think, oh, why didn't I just eat it instead of putting it in a plastic bag? I'm so curious. And why you're so anti clothesline?
Oh, well, first of all, I live in a 14-story apartment, and that's one thing that kind of creates a problem. And so I don't think I'm ever going to have the opportunity.
So before we lose everybody, because some people have had to leave, I would like to thank Carolyn so much for having opened our eyes in so many ways this evening. And I look forward to watching this over and over again, and watching it with my family as well, as soon as I get this up on our YouTube channel. So you can look for it probably in the next week or two. And I'm not making promises, but I do my best. It'll be on the BPW Niagara Falls YouTube channel. We already have some videos there as well. So Carolyn, thank you immensely, Carolyn. I will now stop the recording if that's okay, and then we can continue this.
Yeah. Would it be presumptuous of me to suggest that we might contact you again just if we had questions?
Absolutely. It won't be a problem at all.
That would be great. Thank you so much.